Welcome to the Hockey Writers Sabres Scoop, a weekly show with our top Buffalo Sabres writing crew, bringing you the latest news, rumors, trades, player grades, game results, and much more. From training camp to the playoffs, from draft day to the trade deadline, our team covers everything that happens with the Sabres. So get a pen and paper and turn up the volume. You're about to get the Sabres Scoop. Sabres Scoop.
Welcome to Sabres Scoop, presented by the Hockey Writers, a once-a-week show covering all things Buffalo Sabres and NHL hockey. We thank you for joining us today, and to make sure you don't miss any future episodes, be sure to subscribe to and like our show on YouTube and catch the great hockey content on thehockeywriters.com. You can also find us on Twitter at SabresScoopTHW and everything else at The Hockey Writer. And as always, make sure you head over to morningskate.io to sign up for our daily Morning Skate newsletter so you don't miss the latest and weirdest hockey news every day. Jordan, when I say we have not had an episode like this in all 35 episodes of this show's existence, I mean it. This is not the piece of news we've been waiting for, but it is a piece of news that is perhaps even more shocking. So please take it away for our fans.
Yeah, I didn't think we would be talking about this last week, but yet here we are. The Buffalo Sabres have stripped Jack Eichel of his captaincy, and this is coming after he failed his physical on the first day of training camp. We got to break this down, so let's begin. General Manager Kevyn Adams went into that dressing room to break the news to the team first before the media came out. So, this was clearly thought beforehand. He wanted to let the team know. What do we think of this decision ultimately by management and ownership? Because, they were involved, the Pegulas. So let's just break it down here. Brandon, what do you think of the Sabres doing this?
It's shocking. I mean, I understand the rationale behind it. I saw a bit of what Kevyn Adams said. I also saw what some of Don Granato said, which we'll get to. He has a great quote there I thought was very good. But it's shocking. I still haven't quite made up my mind. A part of me wants to say this was the right thing to do to try and move the culture in the right direction, if that's really what they want to do, and transfer leadership to the younger players that want to be there, which is what Kevyn Adams has harped on all offseason. Another part of me wants to say, well, why couldn't you have just traded him and not done this, publicly embarrassed him like this? There's two sides to it. And, even writing it out in words hasn't quite helped me to understand how I feel, but I'm interested to see how you feel, if anything.
Yeah, honestly, man, I think I lean towards the side of this is publicly embarrassing him at a national level. Everybody's talking about this. This is the biggest story to come out of this day so far. I get why they're trying to do it. As an organization, I can kind of understand the point of it. And we're going to get into Don Granato's quote here, and they believe this is going to help this not be a distraction. But you're not even naming it a captain anyways. I get that Jack Eichel wasn't really expected to be a captain heading into the season because he was going to end up having to be a part of their roster. He hasn't been traded yet, of course. That hasn't happened yet. But was it really necessary to do this? Strip him of his captaincy like this? Is this going to help anything? I don't know. I think it's kind of crazy. I get the San Jose Sharks stripped Joe Thornton and Patrick Marleau of their captaincies. Mm-hmm. It was okay that they were a good team, but I just think this is a pretty embarrassing day for the Sabres organization, in my opinion. The fact that this has come out like this, and that's what I have to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with a lot of what you said. Like I said, I'm going back and forth. I can see both sides. But I would agree with you in saying that I don't understand why this couldn't have not happened if they were going to trade him ultimately, or he wasn't going to play. It's odd timing is all, and it's odd that it happened in the first place. But, Don Granato had a quote that makes me think he maybe didn't have so much a hand in this as Adams ultimately did. He said he was a great captain here. Now he's gone through this. It's tough to be that when you're not present and you're dealing with what he's dealing with. So I think in fairness to him, it's a healthy situation. He can just focus on himself. I'm interested to know what you think of Don Granato, and did he really have a hand in this?
No, I don't think Don Granato necessarily had too much input on this decision. And really, what else is he going to say, right? I mean, in his short tenure there, Jack Eichel wasn't even really there. So, he was barely even partaking with the team at that point. So he doesn't really have too much firsthand knowledge of Eichel as a captain. But I did like this quote from him. And I think, the end of that is interesting when he says, so I think in fairness to him, it's a healthy situation in terms of him not being the captain. I get what he's trying to say there. It's just so he can focus on his health. He doesn't have to focus on an added element of trying to be a captain of this team when he's, trying to be traded. Let's just put it up. Let's just put it like it is. Don't sugarcoat it. Jack Eichel's trying to get traded from this team, his management, and his agents made that very clear to management. So him being the captain doesn't really make sense. And he also has this injury that he's dealing with. So I like what Don Granato's saying there. And Kyle Okposo also had a little bit to add on to this in regards to the Kevin Adams speech to the team yesterday. And basically he said that it addressed any Eichel related questions that players may have. He expressed confidence this situation will not be a distraction. What do you think of that quote there, Brandon? Because that intrigues me. And this has kind of been a huge headline to come from this. Is this going to be a distraction with Jack Eichel and the Buffalo Sabres?
It depends on how long it drags out. It really does. And I think that's always been the answer. I mean, obviously, if you're a player in that locker room, if you're a player in this organization, you know what's going on. They're just like us. They have valid concerns. They want to know what's going on with their teammate, their captain, now former captain. How is this going to end? And I just want to go out there and play and, move on and establish a new leadership group. Obviously, everybody has questions. But if Kyle Okposo, a veteran leader in that room, says that it won't be a distraction, I'm pretty confident that we can trust players like him, like Zemgus Girgensons, who we'll talk about, like other players who, are confident in the leadership group of that team. And we just got to put our trust in those players. Ultimately, I don't think we'll ever know what was said within the confines of that locker room, which is, that's for them to know and us not to know.
Yeah, definitely. Now, I'm honestly going to debate you a little bit there, Brandon, because I do think in terms, he's obviously going to say it's not going to be distraction. And to some extent, it's not going to be like they're going to play the games and do exactly what's expected of them. But look at situations in the past, even look at Pierre-Luc Dubois with the Columbus Blue Jackets. I think it's fair to say that team was definitely distracted by that whole situation. That basically derailed their whole season. Even looking at the Colorado Avalanche with Matt Duchene, when he had all those trade rumors circulating around him, all of those comments, it was just a nasty situation there. I think that distracted the team. Now, luckily for Buffalo, they're already projected to be bad. Those teams were kind of projected to be decent. So I think no matter what, it's tough to know, right? Like, are these guys, I wonder how the media is going to handle this, if they're going to really try to harp on Eichel a lot, or if this is kind of the end of it now that it's been talked about. Maybe they just won't focus on it until there's a breaking news story potentially. But I don't know. There's so many factors here. It's a tough situation to digest, really. It's hard to talk about, but I'm going to even tie this into John Vogel's latest piece for The Athletic that got released today. It's a great article. And even the tweet about it even just says it all. He tweeted the Buffalo Sabres are flat out wrong in their treatment of Jack Eichel. The title of this article, however, is Jack Eichel should be allowed to live the life he wants, not the Sabres want for him. Do we agree with Vogel's stance here? Have the Buffalo Sabres not only screwed up in terms of the trade value sense here, but also ruining the player's personal life?
Yeah, the fact that this is coming from John Vogel should tell you a lot. This is a journalist who has covered this team for 20 years now. So he has seen some good teams. He's seen some bad teams, a whole slew of general managers and coaches. So he knows what he's talking about. And for him to take a stance like this is pretty powerful. And honestly, I've gone back and forth because it's very hard and some facts haven't been released to us until certain times. But at the end of the day, I do believe that Jack Eichel should have the freedom to make the choice to address a medical situation that has to do with his body, and it shouldn't be with the team. And from what I understand, I even heard Elliot Friedman talking about it on NHL Network Radio today, that the only reason Eichel, because, why can't Eichel just go out and do that? The only reason is because he could be suspended. That's in violation of his contract. There's a lot of reasons why he won't just go do it. So he's actually respecting the wishes of the team here, as much as it might frustrate and anger him, which is why this is such a frustrating and angering situation. Like, Jack Eichel should be able to go do what he wants medically to his own body. And because he has a contract with this team, that's just not how it's going to happen. Now, it makes it hard because if he gets traded to another team, is there a team that's going to agree with the Sabres medically? There are so many layers to this, but ultimately, I think I side with Eichel on this one.
I mean, I remember Friedman mentioning that as well, just because like there's a decent chance other teams might not want Eichel to get this disc replacement surgery, right? I know the Sabres are kind of imposing a fusion surgery, and that's ultimately what Eichel's declining. Who's to say that the team that acquires him doesn't want that same thing? Maybe that's why it hasn't happened yet. Not only are there the roster constraints, teams have already set the rosters, but this is also that viewpoint of it. That's why the situation is so difficult. It's really difficult to tell, honestly, when this trade's going to be able to go through. Like, I think it seems like we're still months away. Like, we're going to be a decent time away. And I mean, he still has 5 years left on his contract. I just wonder how much of this current year it's going to take for this situation to get resolved, because it's hard to think it's anytime soon. And there's some frustration here on both sides. I can tell. I know they're trying their best here, but there's no way any party's happy.
Yeah. And, earlier in the summer and even toward the end of last season, we were saying, let's hope this gets done before it gets ugly, but it's already gotten ugly. We're at that point.
Way uglier than I think anybody could have even expected. Like, who expected it to actually get like this? This is like NBA level drama, what's happening right now.
Yeah, it's a whole other level of crazy. And I mean, you and I are going to have a lot to talk about, I'm sure, but I just hope that both sides can split amicably somewhat, and Eichel can go play, have a great NHL career, and the Sabres can play and have a great team at some point in the future. These are two worlds that I hope can exist with each other, but let's just see. But we do have some positive news to pivot to. I mean, honestly, out of training camp day one, there's been a lot of great news as well. This one coming from yesterday. The Sabres re-signed Rasmus Dahlin to a 3-year contract worth $6 million AAV. I think this is a great signing. I know you yourself tweeted out that Dahlin could earn his money as soon as this season. So what do we think of this deal? Because there has been some mixed opinions on this. Evolving Hockey's tool had a 3-year deal for him being 4.7 million AAV, well over a million under what he actually signed for. But in this climate, we've seen that players are getting paid a lot of money, and I would say he's getting paid pretty fairly. What do you think?
Yeah, it's an interesting scenario with Dahlin, right? Because you look at all the micro stats on him, and they suggest that he's not necessarily the player that he should have been at this point. And I think, the eye test would kind of suggest that as well. He hasn't been, I mean, he had such high expectations for him, right? But even looking at what he's done, like very few 18 to 20-year-old defenders have even produced at a 40 to 50 point pace, right? Like, if you look at the sample size, it's very low. So he's been pretty impressive, but because of the godly expectations he had to be like a Victor Hedman or Erik Karlsson right off the bat, it's just been tough for him, and the Sabres haven't been a good team. So that's actually played a factor into it, I believe. I've seen some mixed opinions on this as well. I mean, $6 million to me, when I saw this initially, I did think this was a good contract, looking at what guys are currently signing for. I mean, this is going to directly affect what Quinn Hughes makes in Vancouver. So I guess whatever he gets paid is going to kind of be the deciding factor there. But a guy like Zach Werenski just signed an 8-year deal at $9.5 million, well over his AAV, just so Columbus could keep somebody. I think Buffalo's doing decently well here. And yeah, they're going to have to pay Dahlin big time in 3 years, because I think he's going to completely outperform this. Like, even I would bet even starting next season, he's going to be definitely worth more than this. And by year 3, man, you might be talking about over $10 million at that point. I'm even going to put that take out there.
Yeah, well, honestly, I know it's a lot of money, but I hope you're right, because I hope the Sabres get the first overall 2018 draft pick that they drafted in Dahlin, and I hope he exceeds expectations. I really hope he outplays this money. And like you said, I think he's going to.
Definitely. And we still have some more training camp did actually happen, guys. There was a training camp that took place. So we know a few things here. We're going to dive through the lines, but an interesting point is that Zemgus Girgensons, who's back, by the way, he wasn't here at all last season because of a hamstring injury. It sidelined him for the entire year. He's back, so that's great. You can tell the room really loved having him back as well. They really valued this guy as a leader. NHL All-Star, by the way, back in the day. I'm sure you remember that there, Brandon. NHL All-Star Zemgus Girgensons. And we also know him and Arttu Ruotsalainen will start off as centers in this training camp. So intriguing there. Ruotsalainen did spend some time at the NHL level at center, but they were kind of rotating him there with Dylan Cozens. So That was intriguing to me. I did a lineup projection article, and I had Ruotsalainen as a winger, so it seems like I'm already off base there. But the fourth line they have projected actually matched with my article, so let's kind of dive into it there. We'll start with the fourth line, actually, then we'll work our way up. Drake Caggiula, Zemgus Girgensons, and Kyle Okposo. I projected this exact fourth line in my article, and at this point in time in training camp with their experimentation, that's what they're going with. What do you think of that fourth line?
I like it. I mean, they were skating two separate practice groups today because there are 58 players in this training camp roster, which is insane. But yeah, as a fourth line, I think that's really good. I mean, 2 years ago there was Johan Larsson, Girgensons, and Okposo, and that was a very good, very effective fourth line. And to add Drake Caggiula into that mix, I like it.
Drake Caggiula is actually a pretty good player, and he didn't even look that bad after getting claimed off waivers from Arizona last year. He's an NHL level player here, at least. And I mean, have him on your fourth line, I think that's going to be okay. So I think this will be a decent fourth line. I mean, the interesting thing about this is where does Tage Thompson play? But at this moment in time, we know on the third line that appears where he's destined to be with Casey Middlestad and Anders Bjork. Now, these are two separate training groups, as we said. So I don't know if this line's exactly going to be the way it is. I would be curious about that. But at this moment in time, that's what they're going with. And what do you think of that? Tage Thompson obviously has a lot to prove. Casey Middlestad looking to kind of prove that last season wasn't a fluke and maybe even build upon that. Anders Bjork kind of solidified himself into the lineup after not really getting the chance in Boston. This is really his opportunity to grab here. What do you think of mixing these three players together?
I like the mix because you previewed it a little bit by saying these three players all have something to prove. I'm excited to see a full season of Anders Bjork and to put him alongside Middlestat, a player that I wrote a whole article about how I think he's going to break out this season. I think those two players are going to complement each other really well and could be great line mates for many seasons to come. Tage Thompson is another one that I really would like to see go off, for lack of a better word, at next season, because he's had a tough few seasons since coming to Buffalo in that O'Reilly trade. And I really think that he turned it up toward the end of last season under Granato, and like the two players beside him, I think that they could all have a really great season points wise and otherwise. Let's work our way back up the lineup. Second line, Rasmus Asplund, Arttu Ruotsalainen, you have his jersey. Vinny Hinostroza, a new addition to the team. Hinostroza is a player who's hopped around quite a bit, so I'm interested to see how he bounces back, especially with the Sabres, where it seems like there's no ceiling for any of these young players. If you play well, you will earn more playing time, according to what Don Granato said today. So for Hinostroza, that's got to be exciting. Ruotsalainen, the same thing. He's a player who played very well, I think, all things considered, in a depleted Sabres lineup, and more playing time could benefit him. Rasmus Asplund is another player. I'm really happy the Sabres didn't lose to the Kraken. What do you think of this second line?
Oh, I definitely like the potential of it. I mean, Vinny Hinostroza had such a terrible start to last season with the Florida Panthers. He gets traded back to Chicago, where he originally played a few years ago, and he puts up 12 points in 17 games. Like, he was just incredible there. And Chicago wasn't necessarily the best team. Well, guess what? The Sabres aren't projected to be a great team as well. So if Hinostroza is one of those players that play good on a bad team, then expect him to probably be a main key contributor here in Buffalo this season. And if he is, why not pair him with a young guy in Arttu Ruotsalainen, who they clearly believe is going to be a center here moving forward. I don't know exactly if he's a second line center this year, maybe a third line center. Either way, it's going to be intriguing to see this kid develop, because he's such a power play threat in terms of his shot, even at even strength. He can do it all. I know he kind of had a tough start to the prospect challenge. I was kind of seeing that, but I thought he gradually got better there. I mean, I'm confident in this guy. He dominated at the AHL level last year. I think it's time to really give him that full-time NHL role. And in terms of Rasmus Asplund, I said this in my article as well. The Sabres value this guy. They even went up to Jeff Skinner to ask him to waive his no-move clause for the expansion draft, just to make sure they could protect Rasmus Asplund. He's a part of this team's plans moving forward, at least for the immediate future, potentially even long term. He's a young guy. I think he's going to be a really good bottom six forward just in his career. I don't think he's necessarily going to be more than that. He's versatile. He'll play anywhere. He's a good guy to have on that line.
Totally agree with you there. And let's wrap it up with the first line for our training camp forward group. This is a first line that I think could be a first line for the entire season. Jeff Skinner, Dylan Cozens, Victor Olofsson. What do you think about that? Is Jeff Skinner going to rebound big time if he does get first line minutes? Is he going to rebound if he's playing alongside Dylan Cozens? Is Cozens going to have a breakout season this year, build upon his rookie season? Is Olofsson going to play well at 5-on-5? Let's hear it.
Well, you can definitely see the Sabres are taking a different approach than they did at the start of at the start of last season, sorry, because Jeff Skinner's getting some playing time. He's not starting on the third or fourth line anymore, getting healthy scratched. They want their $9 million winger to produce. And, they somewhat make that contract, serviceable moving forward because he's still going to be here. So they're pairing him with Dylan Cozens. Now, the question I have with Cozens is he a center at the NHL level over an 82-game season? He does kind of remind me of Sebastian Aho in that sense, because if you do recall, Aho was a winger coming into the NHL. And after a few seasons, they tried him out at center and ultimately it worked out there. So they're trying it out early with Cozens. I mean, he did look good there, but is he going to be able to do it? Especially first line, would he be playing first line matchups? I don't know. I mean, that's going to be an intriguing question there because I think Casey Middlestat could potentially end up replacing them if it's really needed. But I do think Cozens could thrive there. I don't think he's going to have a sophomore slump. He didn't even necessarily have the strongest rookie season. You're going to see a better season from Dylan Cozens this year, I have to imagine. And Victor Olofsson even. Is he going to be able to get back to the level that he was at in his rookie year, when he played at like a 60-point pace, 30-goal pace? I think he can. I think this is a really good player. Similar to Ruotsalainen, but he does it more effective power play threat in terms of his shooting ability. But can he do more than that? Can he drive the play? Who knows? He might be expected to. I don't even know. Who would you say is the best player on this line, Brandon? Who do you think is going to have to be expected to be the main contributor here?
I think as young as he is, I think the main contributor is expected to be Dylan Cozens on the first line. I mean, he's got to drive the play, much like Casey Middlestat and really every center in this forward group. Don Granato has said there's not one guy who stands out above the others right now. So it's going to be wide open. It's going to be whoever plays. That's going to be who's gets the, plays well, is going to get the playing time. And I think Dylan Cozens is going to step up big time. And I hope he really plays well.
Yeah, definitely. Kyle Okposo actually had some high praise for Zemgus Girgensons, just moving back to the Girgensons talk, who's returning from more than a year away from the team due to urgency. Okposo specifically said, there's no analytic for that guy. There's zero. That guy brings so much to our team and so much energy, and he does everything the right way. That guy's one of the best teammates I've ever played with. And, Okposo played in the island, came to Buffalo. I mean, he's done it all. That's some incredible high praise there for Zemgus Girgensons. So, I mean, what do you think Girgensons is going to bring to this lineup? And what are we excited to have him back as a veteran leader in that room? Are we really excited to see Zemgus back?
I really am. And even if he's playing in a fourth line role, I really am excited to have him back. I think the Sabres lost a lot of, leadership, penalty killing strength, power forward qualities in their bottom six when they lost Girgensons last season. So to have him back, it might be a small addition, but it really will go a long way as one of the veterans in that room to be able to play that power forward position and rotate up and down in the bottom six. It's going to be really, really good for the Sabres to have that. So I am excited.
And I just want to quickly add there, CODY EAKIN, it looks like is projected to be the team's 13th forward, which I kind of like that because even, replacing a replacement level guy in Zemgus Girgensons with him, EAKIN last year was below replacement level, like we talked about. He won faceoffs, and that was basically it. It was kind of a black hole. So he's going to play games obviously this year, but if he's not playing anyone, I think that's going to make the Sabres actually more competitive and at least be somewhat of a decently hard team to play against in these games.
Yeah, definitely. Moving on to an off the ice piece of news here. We learned today that the Sabres have a 100% vaccination rate, according to GM Kevin Adams, when he was asked by the media. So he was prompted, but he had an answer. And it's what the fans wanted to hear ultimately, because there would be major complications if this were not the case. So when asked about this topic, Kyle Okposo said that once they said that they weren't going to file for the exemption to go to Canada, that really put a lot of pressure on the people that were holding out, because it's a huge chunk of the season that you're not going to get paid for. It's funny what happens when you start to affect people's wallets. What do we think of this statement? And do we see all 32 teams reaching the 100% vaccination come the regular season? I know we have a segment on the general NHL news of this episode, but what do we think?
Yeah, for sure. I won't go too much into specific players here, but like I think the concept that he mentioned there and how it's going to affect players' wallets, it's very definitely what's happening here, unless your name's Tyler Bertuzzi, of course. But but in terms of vaccinations, I mean, we saw it even with the Montreal Canadiens organization. Their top young prospect, Jesse Olanin, was kind of hesitant to get the vaccine, but after all of the controversy that surrounded his decision, he quickly reversed it and got vaccinated, basically. So now he's going to be able to play for Laval there and potentially play for Montreal if he gets called up. So I think you're going to see situations like that with some of the players that remain unvaccinated. I think they might eventually get vaccinated. It just depends, you know. But it seems like most teams are, I'm seeing all these tweets that most teams are mainly getting 100% vaccinated. So that's good to see, because look at a team like Columbus. They're basically saying if you're not vaccinated, you're not really welcome at training camp. They said that to Zach Ronaldo. So we're going to dive a little bit more into this topic later in the show, but it's really good to see the Sabres are in the 100 percentile here, along with other teams. The NHL's actually surprisingly doing pretty well in this. You know, they're actually, I would say, probably the best league at the moment out of all the major professional sports leagues in terms of handling this. So it's actually pretty impressive.
Yeah, totally. I agree. And before we switch gears here into some general NHL news, let's end off with some positive Sabres talk. Dylan Cozens, as we mentioned, was on the NHL media tour last week, and he had a following message that he spread to Sabres fans, which I love to read this. Dylan Cozens said, "It's been a tough decade for Sabres fans. I just wanted to bring some positivity to them, let them know that we do really have a bright future here and that we're not going to let this keep going." Straight up question here. Is Dylan Cozens going to be the next captain of this team?
Oh, man. Just hearing him talk in the media, everything he says, I mean, a lot of fans are obsessed with this guy, and why not? Because I think he might be, man. Like, he can't be yet. You can't put that pressure on this guy. Look at what you just did with Jack Eichel. But do you really think it makes sense to be doing that? And because generally that doesn't necessarily work out. Like, there's people that even question Connor McDavid at it. I remember there were questions surrounding him. Only like Sidney Crosby was the last true guy that got, and I guess Gabriel Landeskog as well. Those were the last two like really young players to be named captain at such a young age that have actually turned out to be decent options. But with Cozens, I mean, maybe he is the outlier to the rule. Maybe he can be captain at a young age. And maybe even 2 seasons from now, we'll be talking about that, because he definitely has that mentality. And really, he's just putting the team behind his back. What a great quote to say there. You know, he knows the fan base is kind of down at the moment. You know, they're fragile. And just to say that this team does have a really bright future here, because at the end of the day, they do. They've restocked the prospect cupboards, and I think they're going to continue to do so. I like the personnel this team's brought in. There is some hope actually going into this next decade. And once this Jack Eichel stuff is figured out, we're going to be completely past this old era. You know, we're going to be heading towards this new era. And that's what Dylan Cozens is trying to reinforce here, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you. And I think he's going to be an exciting player to watch this season. And he has my vote down the road if he continues the trajectory he's on.
Definitely. And, you know, getting all of that Sabres talk out of the way, it is time to reset the show. So you're watching Sabres Scoop, presented by the Hockey Writers. Make sure to subscribe to and like the show on YouTube, and catch the great hockey content on thehockeywriters.com and on our Twitter feed at Sabres Scoop THW. Brandon, we have some general NHL news here. Training camps open for not just the Sabres, but the entire NHL, and some pressure points are starting to happen. Players wanted to sign contracts. They want to get to camp, and that starts in Minnesota with Kaprizov.
Yes, it does. And we've been talking about this one for some time now as well. We've been keeping a close eye on this because we thought the Minnesota Kaprizov, you know, whatever agreement they came to would have some Jack Eichel implications. That remains to be seen. But here's the news. The Wild re-signed Kirill Kaprizov to a 5-year contract worth 9.5 million AAV. One of us had to have predicted this, right? I mean, like, we talked about a lot of different term and cap situations, but what do we think of this deal?
We pretty much almost bang on. I think most people were saying 9 million over 5 years. So it was pretty close, but overall, I mean, it's obviously a lot of money, right? They're giving him a lot of money based off one season of work, but he still won the Calder Trophy as the league's best prospect. You know, the league's best rookie. That's literally what that's what the trophy is, the Rookie of the Year. That's what he was. And he earned it, really. Like, Jason Robertson was close to him from Dallas, but I mean, he was just so that one thing Kaprizov really did for that Minnesota lineup was change the entire identity of that team. he made them fun to watch. He just like his play style basically, it was infectious to the other scoring lines there. So I mean, he made Victor Rask look good. Like that's not the easiest thing to do, So I hope I hope he gets to play with Jack Eichel soon. I know we talk about that once a week as well. I think Jack Eichel's going to end up there. And I hope so too, because I mean, they have a short window here to win the Stanley Cup before these, capture penalties kick in on Ryan Suter and Zach Parise. So I'm glad something goes good for Minnesota for once. So that's good to hear.
Yeah, definitely.
And yeah, so with that in mind, we're going to kind of dive more into this topic on the unvaccinated players. And we're going to look at a few players in Zach Rinaldo, Tyler Bertuzzi, Josh Archibald, and BODE WILDE. We're going to start off with Tyler Bertuzzi here because he's quite clearly the best player that's kind of come out with this stance. All of the other players are generally on the bubble, like they're barely even in the league. But Tyler Bertuzzi just got re-signed this offseason. Like he plays on their first line. Like this is a good player here. And because of this, stance he has where it's a personal choice for him, he doesn't want to get vaccinated. He will be forfeiting in the ballpark of $450,000 of salary, as he won't be able to play in the 9 games Detroit plays in Canada. Do you believe this is worth it, Brandon?
It's a tough question because is it worth it for him? Is it worth it for the team to keep him on the team? There's a lot of layers to this, obviously. The NHL is going about this in an interesting way. I think it does go up to them is that players can continue to play if they're in the situation Bertuzzi is in, but they can't cross the border because of the border restrictions. I don't know if if it's worth it for a lot of the parties involved. I'm interested to see how it plays out because Tyler Bertuzzi, I think, is a good player, and I think is a good young player on the Red Wings. He's a player I actually really like. So I'm very interested to keep an eye on his situation. I don't know how it's going to play out. I don't know if you have any insight to this either.
Hey, living in the Toronto market, it was rumored that the Leafs were potentially interested in him. And I have to wonder if they knew about this, ahead of making all the moves they did and not acquiring Bertuzzi. Because imagine if he had been traded to a Canadian market, well, it would only that would be a disaster. And I think about the Red Wings here too, is they're at least expected not to be a good team, but because if Bertuzzi was on a good team and he was basically not able to play in a decent amount of games there, and he was basically costing their teams win in the process by doing that, it would be a different story. I don't think Steve Yzerman would necessarily be as, understanding as he has been, at least is what we've been led on to by the media availabilities by him. So we've covered that because there's a few more to go on here. This next one's very intriguing. With Archibald, it came out that his teammate Alex Stalock is going to be sidelined this upcoming season because it appears at the moment he's kind of contracted this heart condition after getting COVID-19. So he's still, Archibald is still unvaccinated after all of this news is circulated. And there's not much to comment on besides, wow. What do you think of this decision by Archibald here? Mark Spector of Sportsnet even wrote quite, he had a headline for the ages just like John Vogel did, basically talking about how this is selfish by him. Would you tend to agree with that?
It's interesting. Alex Stalock, I didn't actually know that about Alex Stalock, but that is a thing we've seen with athletes, weirdly enough, how they get heart conditions if they do contract COVID, which is very interesting. But for Archibald, like you said, for a bubble guy who's barely in the league, it's a heck of a stance to take. Obviously I didn't read the article, so I don't know all the details, but that is surprising. I guess that's all I have to say since I haven't read the article, but definitely is a surprising decision on his part.
Well, the article kind of reiterates most of the points that, the general fan base, which is basically, Josh Archibald isn't a good enough player to be doing this, Same with Zach Rinaldo. Like, these guys are barely NHL players, and you're making this stance, and you're acting like the NHL is a privilege to play in, man. Like, it's a privilege to be in this league. And ultimately, I don't know. I just don't tend to agree with that. And BODE WILDE doesn't agree with me because he's also doesn't agree with Lou Lamoriello, it appears like, because he's going directly up against him. And if you're going up to war with Lou Lamoriello, you're generally not going to make it out alive. And this is what he had to say, BODE WILDE, in an Instagram comment, expressing that he's hoping my human rights are enough to let me play. What a world. Do we think this will bode well for him? Pun intended.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be quite honest with you. I have not heard of Bodie Wild before today. So, um, I like you said,
he was a decent prospect. Like he was a second round pick a few years ago, early second round pick. People thought it was a steal when he got drafted by New York. Like, I mean, it's not like he's a no enough. I mean, he hasn't really developed that well, but like he's not a nobody player.
Well, that's what I'm saying. For players like this who haven't cracked the NHL roster yet or are playing for a team where they otherwise would have a chance, like for Bodie Wild, especially with a GM like Lou Lamoriello. I mean, you know how strict he is about things. Even growing facial hair, and he's very strict with the way his players, he wants them to adhere to strict guidelines. For Bodie Wild, I mean, if he, it's the same thing with all of these players. If they want to make that decision, then they understand the consequences, and it's as simple as that. And if the consequences you don't get to play in the NHL, then they better be okay with it.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said there.
Yeah. More interesting stuff out of training camp. Like you said, all 32 teams open up. Patrik Laine, we haven't talked about this guy in a while, I don't think, but he had an interesting comment at the Columbus Blue Jackets training camp today, saying, "I don't have to prove anything anymore to anyone," and followed that up by saying, "I just want to be a better player than I was last year, and it's going to be easier this year because I was pretty shit last year." I like that very trite honesty. That's very awesome to see from him. It's funny. Do we think he's going to have a rebound season? I mean, I don't even know who his line mates are going to be. I could guess, but I'm not entirely sure. Do we think that he remains a member of the Blue Jackets over the long term past this season?
Yeah, I mean, Patrik Laine has always just been a gem in the media. Even at the draft lottery, I remember he was like laying down in a bed, It was just what an interesting player he's been, man, especially in this league. Not only, I mean, on and off the ice, because he always makes an interesting comic, but I think he's gonna regress in the mean. This guy was a 40 goal scorer. And I mean, he had like 3 points, I remember, in like 2 games in Winnipeg. Like he was poised to have a good season. And then everything that happened in Columbus, which was pretty predictable. Most people thought John Tortorella and him weren't going to get along. That basically is what happened. And now they've ultimately gone a new direction here in Columbus. He's actually going to be, by the looks of it, potentially playing on a line with 18-year-old Cole Sillinger. Now, if you don't know Cole Sillinger, he was the 12th overall pick to Columbus in 2021, this past year's draft. He's played well enough that he could potentially earn a spot on the opening night roster. There's space in Columbus. I mean, we'll see if that happens, but he's a damn good player. And if he proves he's ready now, that's a good player to be setting up Patrik Laine. And as well, it would be newcomer Jakub Voracek. He used to play for Columbus all these years ago, went to Philly. He has something to prove because he has not been the player he used to be of a few years ago. So putting all 3 of these guys who have something to prove together, and if that ends up being in their top 6, like their first or second line, that'd be very intriguing to me because I think they're all set to have decent seasons here. So yeah, I like that. I ultimately like his confidence there, and I wish him the best this coming season.
I definitely do. He's a player I want to see rebound. I want to see him score 40 goals again. Like I definitely want him to do well. And Columbus is a very interesting team to me this year. I honestly can't predict where they're going to end up because they never seem to end up where I think they're going to. And especially this season, there's so many question marks, but that could be a good thing at the end of the day.
Yeah, definitely. And they're kind of, just before we wrap up the show here, we want to talk about this. There are 2 new shows on the THW podcast network. I was actually on one yesterday night for the inaugural episode in Howlers and Growlers. It is an Arizona Coyotes centric show, and it's run by Patrick Brown, who's a credentialed writer there. He actually gets to go to the games. He went to the prospect camps. When he gives some terrific insight, so he's watching these players. So he's doing a lot there, and it's also co-hosted by Haynes Evans. So it was a really fun show there, really good vibe. I like it as an addition. And also joining is Focus on the Flyers. It's a Philadelphia Flyers-based show hosted by our very own THW writers, Matt Grizel and Colin Newby. Do you have any thoughts on those shows, Brandon? Are you excited?
I am excited. I love that THW's podcast network is continuing to get built out. And I really especially love the Arizona Coyotes concept that they went there with Howlers and Growlers. The name's great. The concept is great. And it's very cool. Love that our fans are getting to hear about every team that they might want to follow.
You know, I like that you mentioned fans there because we want the fans of this show, Sabres Scoop, to comment down below what your thoughts on this Jack Eichel situation is and how you ultimately think it's going to play out, because we're going to be addressing your comments in the very next episode. We want to make this a little bit more of a fan interactive show. So we want to hear it, Sabres fans. Give us your version, your Sabres Scoop on Jack Eichel. And with that, we're going to be able to wrap up the show today. It was a long one. Decently long, I should say, for just the two of us talking. We're likely going to have a guest on next week. Don't worry. And with that, we thank you for joining us, as this has been Sabres Scoop, presented by the Hockey Writers. Make sure to subscribe to the show on YouTube and follow us on Twitter again at Sabres Scoop THW. As well, you have to make sure you head over to morningskate.io to sign up for our daily Morning Skate newsletter, because you don't want to miss out on that latest and weirdest hockey news coming out every day. Don't miss out on all of the great content on thehockeywriters.com. For Brandon, this is Jordan, and this has been Sabres Scoop. Until next time.